At Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter-in-law left a card on the table. Family trip. Clean the house before we're back. Even the nanny went along. I simply smiled. When they returned and their keys didn't work in the door, my daughter-in-law fainted. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The 12-hour journey from Colorado had drained every ounce of strength from Eleanor Vance's 68-year-old body. She stepped out of the rideshare, her bones aching with the promise of her own bed, a warm bath, and a quiet evening. Her eyes scanned the familiar front porch, the meticulously cared-for rose bushes, and the sturdy oak door that had been her gateway to home for over 3 decades. But something was wrong. Neatly stacked on the cool, damp sidewalk, just beyond the front steps, were her 2 large suitcases in a smaller carry-on bag. They sat there, exposed, like forgotten luggage waiting for a collection that would never come. A knot tightened in her stomach. Disbelief warred with a creeping sense of dread. She walked closer, her footsteps heavy on the concrete path. Tucked beneath the handle of the larger suitcase was a folded piece of paper, bright white against the dark fabric. It was a note, undeniably from Charlotte, her daughter-in-law, whose elegant, looping script was unmistakable. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it. "Eleanor," it began, devoid of any salutation, "we need the space. You can use the garage if you want to stay. It's unlocked. Charlotte." The words were cold, clipped, a stark command masquerading as an offer. If she wanted to stay? In her own home? Her mind, usually so sharp and precise, raced to the logical next step. She pulled her phone from her purse, her fingers fumbling slightly as she dialed the bank. "Yes, I'd like to confirm my most recent mortgage payment," she requested, her voice steadier than she felt. The automated voice confirmed a payment of $1,867 had been successfully debited from her account just 2 days prior. Her account. The house was legally still hers, at least in part, and she was still covering the vast majority of the mortgage that had belonged to her and Arthur. The absurdity of the situation hit her with the force of a physical blow. She was paying for the roof over her son and daughter-in-law's heads while being relegated to the garage. A heavy, mournful drizzle began to fall, tiny pinpricks of icy water on her skin. She didn't move. The rain intensified, mirroring the storm gathering within her. 35 years. That's how long it had been since she and Arthur, her beloved late husband, had first stood on this plot of land, blueprints clutched in their eager hands. They had built this house, brick by brick, dream by dream. Every nail hammered, every wall painted, every garden bed tilled was a testament to their love and their vision for a family home. They had raised Daniel within these walls, filled it with laughter, tears, and the quiet comfort of enduring love. Now, it seemed, her legacy was on the curb. Since Arthur's passing 2 years ago, a subtle shift had occurred. At first, Daniel and Charlotte had been solicitous, almost overly so. But as the initial grief subsided, a pattern of quiet disrespect began to emerge. Missed calls, unreturned texts, suggestions that Eleanor's habits were outdated or her presence inconvenient. Daniel, her son, had once been too attentive, so loyal. But Charlotte, with her sleek modern sensibilities and her insatiable need for control, had slowly, expertly, chipped away at their bond. He had become less a son and more Charlotte's compliant partner, his once strong will dissolving under her influence. Eleanor had chosen to ignore it, to smile through the veiled slights, to believe that love would eventually prevail. Now she understood the true extent of their callousness. With a deep, shuddering breath, Eleanor grabbed her suitcases and dragged them toward the side of the house. The garage door, as Charlotte's note promised, was unlocked. She pushed it open, the heavy door groaning in protest, revealing a dim, cluttered space. Her stomach churned. Her spare furniture, cherished heirlooms, and personal boxes were haphazardly stacked against one wall. A deflated air mattress lay in one corner, covered with a rumpled sheet and a thin, worn blanket. On a small, wobbly card table, her framed photographs, her precious books, and her porcelain teacups were strewn without care, a jumbled mess. This wasn't a room, it was an exile. As she stood there, the full weight of the situation crushing her, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel. Mom, we need the space. Charlotte wants a home office. The garage has everything you need. Don't make this difficult. The words were like a physical slap. Don't make this difficult. As if she was the one making things difficult. As if her life, her comfort, her very existence was merely an inconvenience to their carefully constructed modern life. Eleanor Vance rarely cried. She was a woman of quiet strength, resilience forged in the crucible of life's challenges. Even when Arthur passed, her grief had been a private, dignified affair, shed behind closed doors. But now, in the cold, damp solitude of the garage, tears began to stream down her face, hot and insistent. They weren't just for herself, but for the countless sacrifices she had made for Daniel. The late nights studying with him, the extra shifts she'd worked to pay for his college tuition, the unwavering belief in his potential. This was the reward for a lifetime of unconditional love. She wiped her eyes roughly, her hands shaking. There was only one person she could call. Her oldest friend, Beatrice. Beatrice answered on the first ring, her warm, familiar voice a beacon in the encroaching darkness. Eleanor managed to choke out the story, the words catching in her throat, punctuated by ragged breaths. "Oh, Eleanor," Beatrice murmured, her voice laced with immediate, fierce understanding. "Come straight here. I'll make up the guest room. I'll be there in 20 minutes to get you." No questions, no judgment, just unconditional love in practical action. Sitting amidst the scattered remnants of her life, the air mattress mocking her, Eleanor felt a shift. The tears dried, replaced by a steely resolve. She was done being invisible, done being accommodating, done allowing herself to be diminished. Daniel and Charlotte, in their profound disrespect, had awakened something powerful within her. They had no idea who they were dealing with, she whispered to the empty garage, a quiet vow that reverberated with newfound strength. 20 minutes later, Beatrice's reliable old sedan pulled into the driveway. Eleanor walked out, her head held high, though her heart ached with a pain deeper than any physical exhaustion. She didn't look back at the house, the home she had poured her life, her love, her very essence into. Not yet. The 3 days spent in the anonymous, sterile confines of a motel room had been a purgatory of emotional exhaustion. Each night, Eleanor replayed the image of her suitcases on the sidewalk, the cold indifference of Charlotte's note, and Daniel's dismissive text. The thin walls offered no escape from the relentless cycle of anger and disbelief. Finally, stepping into Beatrice and Henry's warm, inviting home felt like finding an oasis after wandering in a desert. Beatrice, ever the practical angel, had already prepared the spare bedroom, ensuring the door, for the first time in what felt like a long while, could be securely locked, offering Eleanor a sense of privacy she hadn't realized she craved so desperately. "It's about time you were here, Ellie," Beatrice said, her voice a comforting balm as she placed a steaming mug of chamomile tea into Eleanor's hands. "That house, the one you're still paying the mortgage on, is your house. Don't let those two ingrates make you forget that." The mention of the mortgage was a raw nerve. Eleanor settled onto the plush armchair, taking a sip of the soothing tea. "I don't understand how it came to this, Bea," she confessed, the dam finally breaking. "It started so subtly after Arthur passed. Daniel and Charlotte, they were helpful at first, with all the arrangements. But then it was like they slowly started to take over." She recounted the gradual erosion of her space, her autonomy. Charlotte's keen eye for interior design had become a weapon. "Remember Arthur's old fishing gear?" Eleanor asked, a ghost of a smile touching her lips at the memory of her husband's passion. His tackle box, his lucky hat, that framed photo of him with the salmon he caught on their honeymoon. Charlotte saw it all as clutter. She said, "Eleanor, we need to move forward, not live in a museum." And she meant it. She packed it all away. "For charity," she said. The charity, Eleanor later learned, was a dumpster. The ache in Eleanor's heart deepened as she recalled Daniel's part in it all. "And Daniel," she continued, her voice tinged with bitterness, "he just stood by. Or worse, he'd justify it. When I tried to object, he'd tell me I needed to adapt to the new normal. He'd say, 'Mom, Charlotte just wants to modernize. It's better for everyone.'" Each time, Eleanor had retreated, choosing peace over confrontation, believing that Daniel's love was still there, just buried under Charlotte's influence. I enabled them, B, Eleanor admitted, her gaze falling to her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I kept paying the mortgage, even though they technically lived there rent-free. I wanted to help. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to feel needed, loved, I suppose. I thought if I contributed, they'd see my value, that I was still part of their lives, part of the family. The words hung in the air, heavy with regret and a dawning understanding of her own vulnerability. She had paid for her marginalization. Just then her phone buzzed with another text. It was Daniel. Mom, when are you collecting the rest of your things from the garage? We need to convert it into Lily's playroom before the weather gets too cold. Lily, her granddaughter, a constant pawn in their manipulative game. The audacity of it, planning a playroom in the very space they'd exiled her to before she'd even found a permanent place to lay her head. It was a fresh wave of humiliation. Beatrice, who had been listening intently, reached over and snatched the phone from Eleanor's hand, reading the message. Her eyes flashed with a fiery indignation that Eleanor rarely saw in her usually composed friend. That's it, Beatrice practically roared, slamming the phone back onto the table. I cannot believe the nerve of them. And to think I almost didn't tell you, but this changes everything. Her voice dropped, now laced with a pained urgency. Ellie, I overheard something at book club last week. I didn't want to upset you, but Daniel and Charlotte aren't just needing more space, they're selling the house. Eleanor felt the air leave her lungs. Selling what? The words were barely a whisper. They've already put it on the market, Beatrice continued, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. They're talking about a new build in Oakwood Hills, one of those McMansions with all the bells and whistles. They've been going around telling everyone that they finally own a house and can start fresh after inheriting it. They think that because Arthur's name was also on the deed and he's gone, that it's somehow legally all theirs now, or at least they can easily claim it. The full magnitude of the betrayal washed over Eleanor. It wasn't just about the garage or the disrespect. It was about her home, her sanctuary, her very foundation, being ripped out from under her. What do I do, B? She asked, her voice small, lost. Beatrice grasped Eleanor's hands firmly. First, you stop paying that mortgage, not another dime. Second, you call my nephew Mark. He's an excellent lawyer, specializes in elder rights. He'll know exactly what to do. Eleanor flinched slightly at the term elder rights. Elderly, she muttered, a flicker of her old pride asserting itself. I'm just in a difficult situation. Call it what you want, Ellie, Beatrice said gently but firmly. But what they're doing to you is wrong, and it's a form of financial abuse. You deserve to be treated with respect, with dignity, not like an afterthought they can discard. Beatrice's words resonated deep within her. The sharp pain of betrayal began to morph into something else, a slow-burning anger, a righteous indignation that warmed her from the inside out. She was not old, she was not weak, and she was certainly not invisible. She had merely been too kind. Looking at Beatrice, her fierce, loyal friend, Eleanor felt a flicker of hope, or perhaps determination. All right, she said, her voice stronger now. Give me Mark's number. I'll call him first thing tomorrow. The morning after her heart-wrenching conversation with Beatrice, Eleanor found herself across a sleek, modern desk from Mark Wallace. He was Beatrice's nephew, a man in his late 30s with intelligent, observant eyes, dressed in an impeccably tailored but casual blazer. Despite his relaxed demeanor, his professionalism was immediately apparent. Eleanor recounted her story, the years of quiet devotion, the slow erosion of her place in her own home, the final humiliating eviction to the garage, and the crushing revelation of their plan to sell. Mark listened patiently, taking detailed notes, his expression unreadable. When she finished, a heavy silence hung in the air. Mark leaned forward, his voice calm but with an underlying sharpness. So let me be clear, Mrs. Vance. For the past 2 years, you've been making mortgage payments on a house that, after your husband's passing, was transferred fully into Daniel's name. You've been paying $1,867 every month on a property where your son and daughter-in-law have been living rent-free, effectively, and all the while they've been planning to sell it out from under you. It wasn't a question, but a stark, brutal confirmation of her vulnerable position. Eleanor nodded, a lump forming in her throat. Yes, that's exactly it. Mark outlined her options. We could sue for recovery of the payments you've made, arguing it was an implied rental agreement or even a verbal contract for you to remain there. We could also explore elder financial abuse, given the circumstances. There are several avenues we could pursue, Mrs. Vance, but first we need to gather all the documentation, deeds, mortgage statements, any communications you have. Beatrice, who had accompanied Eleanor, interjected. Before we send in the lawyers, Mark, I think Eleanor needs to confront them, face to face. They need to hear it from her, not a letter from a law firm. Mark considered this for a moment, then nodded. A confrontation can sometimes open a dialogue, Mrs. Vance, or at least give you some emotional closure before pursuing legal action. But be prepared for them to deny everything or twist the narrative to suit themselves. The next day, armed with Mark's advice and Beatrice's unwavering support, Eleanor stood on the familiar front porch of the house she had called home for 35 years. The rose bushes she had cultivated now bloomed unchecked, a testament to her absence. The doorbell, which had once chimed a joyful welcome, now felt like a stranger's knock. She rang it, feeling like an unwelcome visitor. Charlotte opened the door, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and impeccably styled clothes a stark contrast to Eleanor's worn but dignified ensemble. A flicker of surprise, quickly masked, crossed her face. "Eleanor, what a surprise! Are you just passing through?" She feigned concern, a carefully constructed facade. "Come in, come in." Eleanor stepped into the living room, a space that now felt utterly alien. Her gaze swept over the pristine, minimalist decor. All traces of Arthur, all the framed photographs, the sentimental knickknacks that had once filled the shelves, were gone. It was no longer her home, but Charlotte's showroom. Daniel emerged from the hallway, phone in hand, his face a mixture of irritation and surprise. "Mom, what are you doing here?" His tone was edged with a lack of welcome that sliced through Eleanor's resolve. Eleanor squared her shoulders, her voice firm. "I know about your plans to sell the house." The words hung in the air, shattering the brittle pretense of normalcy. "This was my home for 35 years. Your father and I built this house, brick by painstaking brick. We raised you here, Daniel." Charlotte scoffed, crossing her arms. "Eleanor, we understand your sentimental attachments, but we need to do what's best for our family now. This house is just not practical for us anymore." "Sentimental attachments?" Eleanor's voice rose, a raw edge creeping into it. "Is that what you call a lifetime of memories? A lifetime of investment?" She took a deep breath, preparing to deliver the bombshell. "For the past 2 years since Arthur passed, I've been paying the mortgage every single month, 1,867, directly from my account to the bank." Charlotte's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, but her composure quickly returned, replaced by an icy glare. "That was your choice, Eleanor," she said, her voice chillingly devoid of emotion. "We never asked you to do that." The sheer audacity of the statement ignited a spark within Eleanor. "My choice? To ensure my son and his family had a roof over their heads? To keep the house from falling into foreclosure? While you planned to sell it out from under me and pack me off to some nice senior apartment?" Her voice crackled with indignation. "I didn't ask for a new house, Charlotte. I just asked for an ounce of decency and respect." Then she delivered the final blow. "Effective immediately," Eleanor announced, her voice unwavering, "I've stopped the automatic mortgage payments. As of yesterday, no more money will be coming from my account." The silence that followed was deafening. Charlotte's carefully constructed facade cracked, a flicker of panic in her eyes. Daniel's face, initially surprised, darkened into a thunderous storm. The reality of the financial implications, the hit to their perfect credit, the potential loss of their free house, suddenly dawned on them. "You can't do that, Mom!" Daniel finally exploded, his face contorted with rage. "This house was Dad's gift to me. You know that it was never really yours, not completely, not after he changed the deed. He meant for me to have it." His words were a venomous strike, a revelation that pierced Eleanor's heart deeper than any previous insult. Eleanor stared at her son, the boy she had nurtured, the man she had loved unconditionally. The utter callousness, the blatant betrayal, the complete rewriting of their shared history left her breathless. The pain was excruciating, but it was accompanied by a shocking clarity. He was no longer her son. He was a stranger, driven by greed and selfishness. I see, Eleanor said, her voice barely a whisper, yet infused with a power that resonated through the now tense silence. So that's the unspoken truth. Your father would be ashamed of you, Gregory. And for the first time in my life, so am I. Using his full, rarely used given name, the one he loathed, was a deliberate, final cut. Without another word, Eleanor turned and walked out, leaving the stunned couple in the home they so desperately sought to claim. Back at Beatrice's, Eleanor relayed the details of the confrontation, including her declaration about stopping the mortgage payments. Beatrice's eyes gleamed with approval. Good for you, Ellie. High time they face some consequences. Mark, however, listening via speakerphone, was more circumspect. Stopping the payments without informing the bank, especially when your name is still associated with the original loan, could have legal repercussions for you, Mrs. Vance, even if Daniel is on the current deed. It could affect your credit score and potentially even make you liable for missed payments if Daniel defaults. He paused, a note of warning in his voice. Legally, this is getting complicated fast. We need to act quickly. A fresh wave of doubt washed over Eleanor. Had she acted rashly? Was she just creating more problems for herself? Oh, Mark, she sighed, what have I done? What you've done, Beatrice interjected, placing a comforting hand on Eleanor's arm, is finally stood up for yourself. Don't you dare second-guess that. Mark, sensing her distress, shifted his tone. Beatrice is right, Mrs. Vance. What's done is done. Now we move forward. I need you to gather every single bank statement, every canceled check, any record you have of those mortgage payments. We need irrefutable proof of your contributions. In the meantime, Beatrice, if you're willing, perhaps you could accompany Eleanor to retrieve the rest of her belongings from the house. It's crucial we get everything documented. Consider it done, Beatrice declared, her eyes sparkling with determination. The next morning, as Eleanor sat nursing a cup of coffee, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed First Federal Bank. Her heart gave a little lurch. This was it, the consequences Mark had warned about. She braced herself for a stern lecture about her financial obligations. Mrs. Vance, this is David Miller from First Federal Bank, the voice on the other end said, unexpectedly calm and polite. I received a rather urgent call from a Mr. Daniel Vance regarding a recent mortgage payment. He seemed quite concerned. There was a subtle pause, almost as if David was weighing his words carefully. I was reviewing your account history, Mrs. Vance, and I saw a very consistent pattern of payments from your account for the past 2 years. Given the unusual circumstances, I'd like to invite you to the branch to discuss some options you might not have considered. Eleanor was momentarily speechless. Options? She managed. What kind of options? I can't discuss specifics over the phone, Mrs. Vance, but I believe it would be beneficial for us to speak in person. Could you come in this afternoon? His tone was empathetic, professional, and entirely unexpected. Hope, a fragile, unfamiliar feeling, began to unfurl within Eleanor. Yes, she said, a new strength in her voice. Yes, I'll be there. At the bank, David Miller, a kind-faced man with sympathetic eyes, explained the intricacies of property law. He laid out the concept of an equitable lien. Mrs. Vance, he began, while the deed may have been in Daniel's name, your consistent, substantial payments for 2 years after your husband's passing, particularly given you were living there and were subsequently displaced, could establish what's called an equitable lien on the property. Essentially, it means you have a financial interest, a claim, even if your name isn't on the deed anymore. He then revealed the exasperating detail that brought a flicker of grim satisfaction to Eleanor. Mr. Vance called us quite upset, demanding to know why his automatic payment hadn't gone through. He seemed rather unaware of how mortgages actually work, Mrs. Vance. He insisted the bank must have made a mistake, even after we explained that the payment simply hadn't been initiated from his account. As if on cue, Eleanor's phone buzzed with another text from Daniel. Mom, we need to talk about the mortgage. Call me back, now. The desperate urgency in his message, the demand for her immediate attention, used to send her scrambling. Not anymore. She looked at the text, then calmly put her phone back in her purse. He would wait. He would wait for her convenience, for a change. David Miller looked at her, his gaze kind and direct. So, Mrs. Vance, he asked, his voice gentle, what would you like to do? It was such a simple question, yet it resonated deep within Eleanor. No one had truly asked her what she wanted in years. For so long, her life had revolved around Arthur's needs, then Daniel's and Charlotte's assumed desires. A quiet resolve settled over her. I want what's rightfully mine, she declared, her voice firm and clear, leaving no room for doubt. That afternoon, Eleanor took another unexpected step, one that surprised even Beatrice. She walked into Stella's Cafe, a bustling, cheerful spot in town known for its delicious pastries and friendly atmosphere. She filled out a job application. When Beatrice raised an eyebrow, Eleanor simply said, I need my own income, B, my own life. I'm not going to be dependent on anyone again. Her first shift was a whirlwind of taking orders, clearing tables, and learning the rhythm of the bustling cafe. She was exhausted when she finally got back to Beatrice's, her feet aching, her mind buzzing with new instructions and faces. But as she collapsed onto the sofa, a sense of invigorating accomplishment settled over her. She pulled out her phone, only to find 6 missed calls and several unread texts, all from Daniel. Without a moment's hesitation, without even listening to the voicemails, she selected them all and hit delete. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Eleanor and Beatrice sat on the porch swing. Eleanor leaned back, a soft smile on her lips. It feels like I'm finally waking up, B, she mused, gazing at the fading light. Like I've been sleepwalking since Arthur died. But now I'm awake. If you're enjoying Eleanor's journey of transformation and justice, don't miss what happens next. Make sure to like this video, share it with a friend who needs a boost, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any part of this empowering story. 3 weeks had flown by since Eleanor had started her new life at Stella's Cafe. The early mornings and late afternoons were demanding, but the rhythm of serving coffee, chatting with regulars, and learning new skills had filled a void she hadn't realized was so profound. Each paycheck, though modest, was a symbol of her newfound independence, a tangible testament to her ability to stand on her own 2 feet. She felt invigorated, purposeful, and for the first time in years, truly alive. One bustling Tuesday afternoon, as Eleanor deftly cleared tables, she noticed a familiar, uncomfortable presence lingering at the hostess stand. It was Daniel. He looked different. His usually impeccable suit was rumpled, his hair slightly disheveled, and his face was etched with a mixture of frustration and something akin to desperation. He avoided her gaze, shuffling his feet like a scolded child. Stella, the cafe owner, a sharp woman with a kind heart, noticed him too. Eleanor, your son is here, she announced, a hint of curiosity in her voice. Go ahead, take a 15-minute break. I'll cover. Eleanor nodded, took off her apron, and walked towards Daniel. This isn't the place to discuss anything, Daniel, she stated, her voice calm and firm, leaving no room for argument. She led him to a small, quiet park bench just outside the cafe, away from prying ears. Daniel slumped onto the bench, running a hand through his hair. Mom, we're in trouble, he blurted out, skipping any pretense of pleasantries. The bank, that lien, our credit score has dropped like a stone. We can't get approved for the new house in Oakwood Hills anymore. Charlotte is furious. They've pulled our loan approval. The words tumbled out, laced with a panic Eleanor recognized, but no longer felt compelled to solve. And? Eleanor asked, her gaze steady. She wasn't going to make this easy for him. And Daniel continued, looking up at her with pleading eyes. We need you to lift the lien and resume the mortgage payments, just until we can figure something out, until we sell the house. Once we do, we promise we'll make sure you're taken care of. A nice senior community, something comfortable. His words, intended to soothe, grated on her nerves. Taken care of. The audacity. Eleanor slowly shook her head. I've been taking care of myself, and you, for years, Daniel. Decades, in fact. The entitlement in his voice, even now, was breathtaking. He still saw her as a resource, a problem solver, not a person with her own needs and feelings. He scoffed, gesturing dismissively at her cafe uniform. Mom, you're almost 60. You can't keep working here, serving coffee. What kind of life is that? I'm 58, Daniel, Eleanor corrected him, a sharp edge to her voice. And I'm doing just fine, thank you. Better than fine, actually. I'm earning my own money, building my own life, something I couldn't do when I was spending all my time and money propping up yours. His face hardened. The mask of desperation began to slip, revealing the familiar frustration and resentment she had seen so often in the past 2 years. Fine, what do you want then? A percentage of the sale? Is that what this is about? How much? He pulled out his phone, ready to negotiate. 10%? 20? Eleanor looked at this stranger wearing her son's face. This man who so easily reduced her lifelong contributions to a monetary transaction. I want my home back, she stated, her voice clear and resonant. The house, Daniel. I want to live in my house. Daniel stared at her, then let out a nervous, disbelieving laugh. Mom, that's impossible. The deed is in my name. We've been planning to sell it for months. You can't just demand it back. He paused, his expression turning cold. Besides, he added, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, if you make this difficult, I'm sure Charlotte will make sure you don't see Lily. Families need to support each other, Mom. Remember that. The veiled threat, invoking her beloved granddaughter, stung. But Eleanor, fortified by her new strength, merely looked at him with an unflinching gaze. Families support each other, Daniel. Is that what you call it? Her voice, though quiet, was laced with an undeniable power. Is that what you call charging me rent for my own home, even though I was paying the mortgage? Is that what you call dismissing your father's memory and throwing out his belongings? She continued, the words flowing with the force she hadn't known she possessed, fueled by years of unspoken resentment. Is that what you call me working extra shifts to put you through college, Daniel? Or Charlotte forcing me to watch Lily countless times without ever offering a thank you, let alone compensation? Is that what you call me, sacrificing my savings to cover the down payment on that boat you just had to have? And all the while, I was still paying the mortgage, putting nearly $2,000 a month into your pockets, simply because I thought it was what a good mother did. She stood up, her break almost over. Daniel sat stunned, deflated, his carefully constructed arguments crumbling around him. I'll think about it, Eleanor finally said, a conditional thought. But I need something in writing from you and Charlotte first. Something official, a signed agreement, and no more games. She looked him directly in the eye, her gaze unwavering. Meet me at Mark Wallace's office tomorrow at 2 p.m. and make sure Charlotte is there too. With that, Eleanor turned and walked back into Stella's cafe, leaving Daniel to grapple with a seismic shift in their dynamic. The atmosphere in Mark Wallace's office the next afternoon was taut with unspoken tension. Eleanor arrived early, her stomach churning with a mixture of apprehension and firm resolve. The decision she had made, with Mark's legal guidance and Beatrice's emotional support, felt monumental. Exactly at 2 o'clock, Daniel and Charlotte walked in, their faces a carefully constructed blend of annoyance and feigned pleasantness. Charlotte, as always, looked impeccably put together, an almost defiant elegance. Mark, ever the professional, opened the meeting. Thank you both for coming. Eleanor has a proposal regarding the property that she would like to present. Charlotte, ever the strategist, smoothly interjected. We're open to finding a fair solution, of course. We understand Eleanor's desire to be compensated for her contributions, and we're willing to discuss a reasonable amount, perhaps a percentage of the sale, to put this behind us. She glanced at Daniel, confident they had the upper hand, that Eleanor merely wanted a payout. Mark offered a small, knowing smile. He then slid a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany desk towards Daniel. This document outlines Eleanor's proposal, as well as the legal reality of the equitable lien established on the property. Daniel picked it up, his eyes scanning the paragraphs. His expression shifted rapidly from hopeful anticipation to baffled anger. What is this, he demanded, his voice rising, a vein throbbing in his temple. This isn't a negotiation for a percentage. Eleanor, calm and collected, met his furious gaze. My condition is simple, Daniel. I will resume the mortgage payments. However, the house will be sold to me for the remaining balance of the mortgage. Charlotte snatched the paper from Daniel's hand, her eyes darting across the text. Her composure shattered instantly. This is ridiculous, she shrieked, slamming the document back onto the desk. It's worth at least 3 times that. You can't be serious. It's worth exactly what I've put into it, Eleanor countered, her voice unwavering. 35 years of mortgage payments, every repair, every improvement, every penny of my savings, every hour of my time, every ounce of my love. You've had 2 years of living there rent-free while I paid for it, and now you want to sell it for a profit you haven't earned. That, Charlotte, is ridiculous. Mark interjected, his voice firm. Legally, the equitable lien significantly complicates any potential sale. No bank will finance a new buyer, and no buyer will purchase a property with such a large, active claim against it. You wouldn't be able to sell the house until this matter is resolved, and a court case could drag on for years, tying up the property indefinitely. Charlotte, visibly shaken, regained some of her icy demeanor. "We'll fight it," she threatened, her eyes narrowed. Eleanor merely raised an eyebrow. "You could, of course, but consider the legal fees, the time, the damage to your credit score, which is already, as Daniel mentioned, quite precarious. The longer this drags on, the further away your Oakwood Hills dream home slips, and the longer you'll be paying for two properties without being able to sell one." Daniel slumped in his chair, defeated. He stared at Eleanor with a look of utter disbelief. "You planned this all along, didn't you, Mom?" he accused, his voice thick with bitterness. "From the moment we moved you to the garage." Eleanor met his gaze, her expression tinged with a quiet sadness. "No, Daniel," she clarified softly. "I didn't plan any of this. I just finally stopped allowing myself to be used. I finally decided I deserved more." A tense silence filled the room. Mark suggested they take a moment to discuss privately. Daniel and Charlotte retreated to a small conference room. After 20 minutes they emerged, their faces grim, their shoulders slumped. Charlotte's veneer of elegant confidence was entirely gone. "We accept your offer, Eleanor," Daniel said, his voice flat. "But I hope you realize what this means for our relationship." Eleanor nodded. "I do, Daniel, and I hope someday you'll realize what it meant when you put my suitcases on the sidewalk." The finality of her words hung in the air. The papers were signed, the terms clear. 3 months later, Eleanor was back in her house. The sense of peace that washed over her as she unlocked the front door was profound. Charlotte's modern updates remained. The minimalist paint, the sleek kitchen fixtures, but they no longer felt foreign. Eleanor wandered through the familiar rooms, touching the walls, feeling the comforting solidity of a home that was truly hers again. She stood in the master bedroom, the afternoon sun warming her face, and whispered, "I'm home." Her chosen family celebrated her homecoming in the backyard she had so lovingly tended for decades. Beatrice and Henry were there, along with Stella, her new boss and friend, and Mark and his wife, raising a toast to her resilience. One Saturday, a few weeks after she moved back, Daniel appeared at her door. He looked thinner, more subdued. He admitted they hadn't gotten the Oakwood Hills house. They were in a small apartment now, he confessed. "Teaching us some perspective, I guess." He also revealed that Charlotte was pregnant again, and that Lily missed her grandma terribly. Eleanor, despite the lingering hurt, told him Lily was welcome anytime. Daniel shifted awkwardly, clearly struggling with something. "Mom," he began, his voice hesitant, "I don't know if I can forgive you for choosing a house over your family." Eleanor looked at him, her heart aching, yet resolute. "Daniel," she said gently, "I didn't choose a house. I chose not to be erased. There's a difference." He frowned, the nuance still lost on him. He still asked if Lily could visit sometimes. Eleanor, seeing a small opening for future reconciliation, for the sake of her granddaughter, agreed. That evening, as the stars began to pepper the darkening sky, Eleanor sat on her porch swing, surrounded by the warmth of her chosen family. Beatrice raised her glass again. "To Eleanor Vance," she declared, her voice ringing with pride, "who reminds us all that it's never too late to reclaim your life, your home, and your spirit." Eleanor smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. She thought of Arthur, of Daniel, of Charlotte, and of the woman she had become, stronger, more determined, unwilling to be diminished for anyone's convenience. She was truly home, not just in the house, but in her own life.